What if I told you the most important car Aston Martin has ever built, the one that literally saved the company, isn't a sleek supercar? It isn't a roaring coupe. It's an SUV, hand-built deep in the rolling hills of South Wales by workers who used to maintain RAF fighter jets on the same ground where that car is now assembled. That is the story of the Aston Martin DBX. And if you've ever wondered what separates a $260,000 luxury SUV from everything else on the road, the answer lives not in a showroom, not on a racetrack, but inside a factory in a small Welsh town called St Athan. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on how this machine is born, what makes it extraordinary, and why the entire future of one of the world's most legendary car brands rests on what happens inside those 3 converted super hangars in Wales. Let's get into it. A name that means everything. Before we walk the factory floor, you need to understand what Aston Martin is, because this isn't just a car brand. This is a 110-year-old piece of British history. A company that has survived 2 world wars, 7 bankruptcies, and more ownership changes than a vintage watch passed between collectors. Aston Martin was founded in 1913 by 2 men, Robert Bamford and Lionel Martin, in a small workshop in London. The name Aston came from Lionel Martin's success at a local hill climb race in Buckinghamshire. From day one, the brand was born on the track, forged in competition, and obsessed with the kind of performance that makes your pulse quicken and your palms sweat. The company rose to global fame in the 1950s and 60s with its legendary DB series. But it was 1964 that changed everything. A silver Aston Martin DB5 appeared on screen alongside Sean Connery in Goldfinger, and the world fell in love. James Bond's car wasn't just a prop. It became a cultural symbol that transcended motorsport, transcended cinema, and became shorthand for everything sophisticated and powerful about British engineering. That single moment embedded Aston Martin into the global imagination in a way that no advertising campaign could ever replicate. From that point on, Aston Martin didn't just make cars, it made icons. But icons don't pay the bills. And for decades, Aston Martin was a passion project more than a profitable business. The company hemorrhaged cash, changed owners repeatedly, and teetered on the edge of extinction more than once. Some estimates put the number of times Aston Martin has faced catastrophic financial restructuring at 7 separate occasions across the brand's history. 7 times, and yet it survived because some things in this world are simply too beautiful to disappear. By the mid-2000s, it was clear, if Aston Martin wanted to survive the next century, it needed to do something it had never done before. It needed to build an SUV. The decision that changed everything. Think about that for a second. A brand so deeply associated with low-slung 2-door sports cars, a brand that practically invented the idea of the Grand Touring Coupe, deciding to build a proper 5-seat all-wheel drive SUV. For some purists, it felt like a betrayal. For the boardroom, it was survival. The logic was simple and irrefutable. The luxury SUV market was exploding. Porsche had turned the Cayenne into its single best-selling model almost overnight after launch, and those profits were funding the entire sports car lineup. Bentley's Bentayga was commanding prices north of $200,000 and selling every unit it produced. Lamborghini was about to do the same with the Urus, and it transformed Lamborghini into a genuinely profitable company for the first time. Wealthy buyers, especially in China, the Middle East, and right here in America, didn't just want a sports car. They wanted something that could handle the school run on Monday, tackle a dirt road on Friday, and feel like a supercar on Saturday. Aston Martin had to have a seat at that table, and not just any seat, a front row seat. The result would be called the DBX. The name carries forward Aston Martin's grand tradition of DB nomenclature, linking it to the iconic DB4, DB5, DB11, and DB12 that came before. And to build it, Aston Martin needed a whole new factory, not an extension of what already existed, but something built with the scale and ambition worthy of the car it would produce and the future it would help secure. Welcome to St Athan, Wales. Here's where the story takes a turn that nobody expected. In February 2016, Aston Martin announced that it had selected St Athan, a small village in the Vale of Glamorgan in South Wales, as the site for its new manufacturing facility. And the location wasn't just strategic, it was poetic. The site had been RAF St Athan, a Royal Air Force base that officially opened in 1938 as the home of the No. 4 School of Technical Training. At its peak during World War II, this facility housed 14,000 military personnel and trained both ground and air crew who kept the British war machine in the air. After the war, St Athan became the RAF's primary maintenance base for some of the most iconic aircraft in British aviation history: the Vulcan bomber, the Phantom, the Harrier jump jet, and the Tornado. These were serious machines serviced by seriously skilled people. The last aircraft to be maintained at St Athan departed in February 2012. The base went quiet. The hangars sat empty. Then Aston Martin arrived. The company had reviewed over 20 potential global locations before settling on St Athan. The 90-acre site, with its 3 enormous converted super hangars that dwarfed anything at Aston Martin's existing Gaydon headquarters, offered the sheer scale that DBX production would require. The Welsh government supported the project aggressively, and supply chain companies across Wales were invited to bid on contracts worth over £60 million. Over 3,000 people applied for the initial positions. The passion for this project was immediate and overwhelming, building the DBX where craft meets engineering. Walk through the doors of the St Athan facility and you're immediately struck by one thing: the scale. These are military hangars. The ceilings soar. The space feels almost cathedral-like, but inside it's anything but quiet. Production of the DBX moves through 4 key stages. First is the body in white, 20 stations where the aluminum structure of the car is assembled. Then comes the paint shop across 40 stations. After that, trim and final assembly covering 50 stations. And finally, off-track, with 18 stations dedicated to inspection and quality control. Each car spends roughly 3 days in each of these 4 areas. Each individual station takes an average of 27 minutes. Do the math, and what you're looking at is a car built with extraordinary patience and precision, not pumped out on a high-speed conveyor belt like a household appliance. The DBX is built on a bespoke bonded aluminum architecture developed specifically for this car and used in no other vehicle on Earth. This isn't borrowed platform technology. Aston Martin's engineers spent years developing an all-aluminum body structure that harnessed the same lightweight, high-rigidity bonded construction techniques they had perfected in their sports cars and evolved it entirely for the demands of a full-size luxury SUV. The result is a vehicle that weighs just 4,940 pounds, despite being a 5-seat SUV with a 120.5-inch wheelbase. That's 500 pounds lighter than a BMW X5M, despite being longer overall. In a world where SUVs keep getting heavier, that number is a genuine engineering achievement. In the body shop, robots from Italian manufacturer Comau apply all the structural adhesives, and additional robots fit the body sides onto the completed chassis tub. Because of the aluminum bonding process, the tack time in the body shop runs at 39 minutes per station, nearly double the pace in the paint shop and final assembly. Chemistry dictates the timeline, and Aston Martin respects that. The St Athan paint shop is genuinely unlike almost anything else in automotive manufacturing. Because the military hangars dictated the available footprint, Aston Martin couldn't spread it horizontally, so they built it vertically, 3 stories tall, rising through the hangar's remarkable height. Ground floor, manual cleaning of bodies. Second floor, robotic spray systems accessed by an automatic crane that lifts bodies into position. Third floor, operating and support equipment. 7 major steps of paint processing: cleaning, priming, base coat, clear coat, flattening, preparation, and polishing happen inside this structure. Every single step is meticulous. Once a body exits the paint shop, the doors and tailgate are removed for subassembly on a mezzanine level. Then the body hooks onto an electric monorail system that carries it through 64 trim and final assembly stations at exactly the right working height for each operator. No awkward angles. The car arrives at each worker perfectly positioned for efficiency, precision, and care. That is not an accident. It is deliberate engineering of the manufacturing process itself, designed to turn heads. The exterior of the DBX is equally considered. Chief Creative Officer Marek Reichman and his team faced a monumental challenge. How do you take a brand synonymous with low, wide, athletic sports cars and translate that DNA into a tall, practical SUV without losing the soul? The answer was geometry and proportion. The wheelbase stretches as far out as possible, pushing the wheels to the very corners of the vehicle. The roofline is kept deliberately low, lower than any direct competitor in its segment. The result creates the visual illusion of a smaller, more athletic machine than the DBX actually is. The front grille is the largest ever fitted to any Aston Martin, flanked by signature triple-element headlights. Swan-hinged doors swing wide with theatrical elegance. Hidden seam lines on the frameless door glass and glass B-pillar finishers add a seamless, sculpted confidence to the stance. This is a machine designed to turn heads even when it's standing completely still, the hands behind the machine. Here's what makes Aston Martin different from a factory producing hundreds of thousands of units a year. The DBX is not a car that robots build and humans inspect. It is a car that humans build and robots assist. The workers at St Athan are highly skilled automotive technicians, many specifically recruited from the local Welsh community and trained at Aston Martin's Gaydon headquarters before St Athan opened. The first 40 employees were hired within 6 months of the initial recruitment drive in Cardiff. They learned their craft building, the DB11, before transferring to Wales. When the DBX 707 performance variant launched in 2022, Aston Martin recruited more than 100 additional skilled technicians to support the ramp-up. In early 2024, the company announced a further 400 new positions across its UK facilities to support continued demand. These are not assembly workers following a simple checklist. These are craftspeople. And nowhere is that more evident than in the interior. Inside the cabin, a study in obsession. Step inside a finished DBX, and your senses are immediately engaged. The smell hits you first, that rich, warm, unmistakable scent of real leather. Not synthetic, not treated. Real, full-grain leather, hand-stitched by the people who assembled it. Every DBX interior is trimmed with leather sourced exclusively from Bridge of Weir, a tannery based in Bridge of Weir, Scotland, just a few miles west of Glasgow. The relationship between Bridge of Weir and Aston Martin dates all the way back to the DB5, the very car that James Bond made iconic. Bridge of Weir is the sole supplier of leather for Aston Martin interiors, and the reason is straightforward. Nothing else meets the standard. The leather comes from cattle raised in the UK and Europe for the beef industry. The hides are a byproduct, and without tanneries like Bridge of Weir, they would become waste. Each raw hide weighs between 90 and 110 pounds. And here's the detail that will stop you cold. Only 1 in every 100 hides produced is considered good enough to go into an Aston Martin interior. 1 in 100. The tannery rejects 99% of what it processes. The chosen hides are processed with the purest Scottish water, treated using techniques refined over more than a century, and produced under a process that makes Bridge of Weir the world's only certified low-carbon leather manufacturer. The seats of the DBX aren't just upholstered, they are crafted. Full semi-aniline leather covers every surface. The optional Alcantara roof lining is an industry first. Both the headlining and the electric roof blind available in a single Alcantara finish, providing thermal insulation and light reduction without sacrificing a single inch of headroom. For the DBXS, the most powerful member of the DBX family, Aston Martin elevated craftsmanship to a level the brand describes as obsessive. The leather headrests are literally sculpted, using both embossing and debossing techniques under 3,307 pounds of extreme pressure and intense heat, imprinting the iconic Aston Martin wings with sub-millimeter precision. This is a first in the entire automotive industry. No manufacturer has ever done this to production leather seats at this level of detail or consistency. And it happens right there on the factory floor in South Wales. The Q program, your DBX, your rules. One of the most compelling chapters in the DBX story is what happens after the car leaves the standard production line and enters the world of Q by Aston Martin, the brand's legendary bespoke personalization service. Named with a knowing nod to the gadget-wielding Q from the James Bond films, Q by Aston Martin is not a trim level. It is a design studio, a commission process, a direct collaboration between buyer and brand to build a vehicle that is genuinely yours in every sense. 3 levels of customization exist: commission, collection, and accessories. Customers can choose from nearly 50 exterior paint colors, 30 primary and secondary interior colors, and a near-infinite combination of contrast stitching, seatbelt colors, carpet finishes, and trim materials. Performance, the number that defines the range. Let's talk about what's under the hood, because the DBX is not just a beautiful box, it moves in ways that will rewrite your expectations. The DBX 707 is powered by a 4.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8 engine sourced from Mercedes-AMG, producing 697 horsepower and 663 pound-feet of torque. This is the most powerful luxury SUV in the world. It weighs 4,940 pounds and gets from 0 to 60 miles per hour in exactly 3.1 seconds. The 9-speed automatic transmission has been specifically tuned for quicker shift times. Put it in Sport Plus mode, activate launch control, press the brake and accelerator simultaneously, hold until the instrument cluster flashes red, and then hold on. With most of the torque shifting toward the rear axle, the SUV pulls passengers back with a force that makes you briefly question whether you left your stomach at the traffic light. In independent testing by Car and Driver, the DBX 707 completed the quarter mile in 11.5 seconds at 119 miles per hour. Top speed is 193 miles per hour. The 2026 DBXS goes even further: 717 horsepower, 664 pound-feet of torque, and a curb weight of just 4,835 pounds, thanks in part to an optional carbon fiber roof, the largest single piece of carbon fiber ever used in any Aston Martin, which removes 40 pounds and dramatically lowers the center of gravity. The chassis is equally sophisticated. Active anti-roll bars, front and rear, generate up to 1,032 pound-feet of stabilizing torque through a 48-volt electrical system. Air suspension can raise the DBX 1.8 inches for off-road use or drop it 1.2 inches below standard ride height for spirited driving. Motor Authority called the result a machine that shouldn't move like this, threading through tight mountain roads like a sports sedan despite weighing over 2 tons. Made in Wales, more than a badge. When the first production DBX rolled off the St Athan assembly line in 2020, it wasn't just a milestone for Aston Martin, it was a milestone for Wales. The DBX was the first production car built in Wales in almost 50 years. On a site where RAF technicians once maintained Harrier jump jets and tornado fighters, Welsh workers were now hand-building 6-figure luxury automobiles destined for buyers in more than 50 countries. 90% of DBX production is exported. This is a Welsh-made product driven on the streets of Los Angeles, Dubai, Shanghai, and Singapore. It carries the Made in Wales designation with genuine earned pride, and that pride is visible in every stitch, every polished panel, and every torqued bolt. By 2022, the DBX accounted for more than half of all Aston Martin sales globally, with 3,219 units representing 50% of the company's total wholesale volume that year. For a brand that spent decades teetering on the edge of financial ruin, those numbers represent something profound: relevance, revenue, and a real future. The St Athan facility now employs hundreds of skilled Welsh workers, and the economic impact extends throughout the local supply chain and into communities across South Wales. Exactly the outcome the Welsh government wagered on when it backed this project over more than 20 global competitors. This is what responsible, intentional manufacturing looks like. Jobs that require skill, pride, and precision. A product that travels the world but carries Wales inside every door panel, every stitched headrest, every carefully placed bolt. The bottom line, you might ask, with all this handcraft, all this precision, all this bespoke artistry, does the DBX actually justify a starting price of $261,000? Does it earn the $307,000 or more that a fully spec'd example commands? Every credible road test says yes. The DBX drives with a precision and urgency that no other luxury SUV can fully match. The steering is direct, the ride is supple, the engine at full throttle sounds like a symphony inside a cathedral, and that hand-stitched, handcrafted 1 in 100 leather cabin wraps you in an experience that no mass-produced machine can replicate, regardless of what badge sits on the hood. This is a car that a human being touched. Hundreds of human beings, each contributing a piece of skill, pride, and craftsmanship that traveled from a Welsh factory floor into your driveway. The story of the Aston Martin DBX is ultimately the story of a brand refusing to die. It's the story of skilled workers in South Wales rebuilding one of the world's most celebrated automotive names to relevance and profitability. It's the story of a 90-acre former military base reborn as one of the most sophisticated luxury manufacturing facilities on the planet. And here's the question I'll leave you with. In an age where everything is being automated, outsourced, and made faster and cheaper, is there still a place in the world for something made slowly, by hand, with genuine human skill and care? Because the people at St Athan clearly believe there is, and based on what they're building and how many people around the world are paying $250,000 to own one, I think they're absolutely right. If you've never thought about the DBX before today, I'll bet you're thinking about it now. And if you already knew this story, drop a comment below and tell me which part blew your mind the most. The RAF history, the 1 in 100 leather standard, the 3-story paint shop built inside a converted military hangar, or the 3.1-second 0 to 60 time in a 5-seat SUV. I genuinely want to hear from you. Share this video with a car lover in your life who still believes that real luxury isn't a price tag. It's a standard of care that no machine can fake. And if you're new here and want more deep dives into the factories, the engineering, and the extraordinary stories behind the world's most incredible machines, hit subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell. We've got a lot more coming and you do not want to miss it.